Great. Hi again, everyone watching this video. Welcome to the inaugural SciStarter Live event. And we are so happy today to be talking about dogs in honor of National Dog Day, which is coming up later this week. Let's get started. So what better way to celebrate dogs than to talk about the great dog projects you can find on SciStarter. So today, first, we're going to get acquainted with each other a little bit and SciStarter in general. And then we'll walk you through how to get started with projects like SeaBark. We'll talk about where you can find resources if you ever run into trouble with SeaBark or any other citizen science project. And all of that should take about 30 minutes. And then for those of you who are with us live today, we'll be staying on the line all the way till the top of the hour, going through your questions in the Q&A. We can work through some projects together and just hang out, and it's going to be great. So glad you're here. So I'm Anna. Nice to meet you. I'm your host today. I'm a science communicator, which means I'm a journalist and I do marketing for science. And most importantly for today, I work with SciStarter, and I'm a citizen scientist and probably most of all a dog lover. So I'm really happy to be a part of this event. First up, I have a poll for you all. I really want to know which of you have ever participated in a citizen science project before. So you'll see a poll pop up on your screen if you haven't already, and you'll be able to click your answer. Give you guys a second.
Few of you have figured out how to answer the polls. It's multiple questions as a heads up. So Anna, you'll be seeing all of the answers, but we'll go through them at the same time.
Totally fine. Well, then I'll tell you about the upcoming questions. So I'd also want to know what brings you here today. Are you an aspiring citizen scientist, student, a parent, teacher? Some of you are in groups. Didn't think of that when I put this question together. All of the above, whole family, one of each. We'd also love to know how you found out about this event. We've been promoting it on Facebook and Twitter. We've been emailing it out. We've just been like telling everyone we know. And finally, do you have a SciStarter account already? So we are gonna try and get you all set up with your SciStarter accounts today. So it looks like I have about 80% of the answers in. Ooh, 85. Ooh, 3 more people. 100%. Give you 30 more seconds to put in your answers.
We also have a few people writing in from Facebook that are responding to this, which is great.
Hi, Facebook.
Hi, Annette.
All right, I'm going to call it. Let's see. I can share the results. So it looks like over half of you have participated in citizen science before. That's awesome. Good diversity of who you are. One board person on the internet. Shout out to you, board person. Oh, good email representation. Good. Lots of people have accounts. Okay, great. Thanks all. All right. I think now we're ready for dog time. It's dog time. I suspected Samson was going to bail on us, so he's ready in spirit. Okie doke. So we are all here today because we're interested in citizen science or dogs. So for those of us that are new to it, though, I want to just talk a little bit about what it is. So citizen science is a collaboration between scientists and those of us who are curious, concerned, or motivated to make a difference. So it is a great way for people of all kinds to make an impact on the issues they care about, all through helping scientists. So before we dive into our dog projects, I did want to share this quick video with you to give you a little more context for what citizen science is all about, in case you are new.
I think our audio might be off.
Together. How can I do that? You might be wondering. The answer is easy. Become a citizen scientist. Citizen science is all about people like you and
didn't miss
getting involved in things that matter to us, like the environment, our health, oceans, and even space. Science needs more eyes, ears, and perspectives than any single scientist possesses.
Together, we get to make discoveries. We can make a difference by making and sharing our observations, analyzing data, or even playing a game to solve a problem. Want to learn more about citizen science, a movement that's sweeping the globe? You're in the right place. There's a lot of great material here to get you started and help you find, join, and participate in projects through SciStarter.org. Visit the SciStarter website to begin exploring the possibilities of scientific participation. And create a personal account to receive project suggestions tailored especially for you. Together with SciStarter, we can all play a part in scientific research that can change the world for the better.
Awesome. Sorry about that sound at the beginning. You heard the important stuff. Cool. So let's get started. So if you haven't already, there are some of us that did not have a SciStarter account. So your first step is going to be to join SciStarter. So SciStarter is a research affiliate of Arizona State University and hosts an active community of over 100,000 registered citizen scientists with millions of additional site visitors. So SciStarter has over 1,600 citizen science projects right now to choose from, but don't let that number overwhelm you. It is super easy to narrow it down by your interests and your location and lots of other filters. So to join SciStarter, you'll just need to create an account. Super easy. Pick your username, fill out your email. Your zip code is actually important so we can tell you about projects in your area. Pick a password, normal stuff. I also recommend signing up for the newsletter because you'll get emails every other week highlighting awesome projects to try. So that's a really great way to find out about new projects, seasonal projects, just our old favorites, events like this one. A lot of people said they found out about this over email. Our last email newsletter was all about dogs, so recommend the newsletter. Anyway, once you're signed up for SciStarter, you're ready to start looking for projects. So today we're all about dogs, of course. There's a bunch of different ways you could study dogs and help researchers study dogs on SciStarter, whether it's wild wolves or your pet dog or everything in between. So to find projects on SciStarter, you're going to go to the project finder. There you can search by keyword, location, other filters. You can see just our affiliates, which are projects that SciStarter works closer with. And SciStarter also gives lots of like guidance and extra support. So it's fun to just poke around the site and find all the different tools that's available for you. So now I'm going to turn it over to our special guest. I will actually stop sharing my screen for a second and we can hear from James. James, why don't you tell us who you are, where you're from, and why you like dogs?
I will, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm a big fan of citizen science, as you might have gathered. And my project is called the Seabark. It's based at the University of Pennsylvania, which is where I am. I'm a professor of animal welfare. And I started this Seabark project really because I wanted to know about the prevalence of behavior problems in the pet dog population, because we know that behavior problems are a big deal. In fact, it turns out more dogs die because of behavior problems than any other cause, especially in the first 3 years of their life. So more dogs get taken to animal shelters because of behavior problems, where often they get put down. And a lot of people take their dogs to their veterinarian for the same reason. And so it's a sort of pressing problem as to how prevalent these problems are in pet dogs and what they're associated with. In other words, can we pin down some of the factors that are associated with a higher risk of dogs developing these types of problems? So that's how it all got started, but it's taken on a life of its own now since then. And now this CBARC survey, which we developed, is being used in all sorts of interesting and unexpected ways.
Awesome. Well, I think we can just try it out and see what CBARC looks like. So normally when we do these events, I think we will go through, whenever possible, we'll go through the project live, but CBARC is sort of a one-time survey. And once you submit your results, you can't look at them. You can't look at your questions anymore. So I did just screenshot the survey for you. So I will share my screen one more time. Okay, are we back? Okay. So if you want to follow along with me, you can, or just sit back and relax and check it out later. So if you're going to get started on SciStarter, you're going to first go to the CBARC page. There's also PHEBARC. You can guess what that is for felines. Type CBARC into the quick navigate bar, or pick it out from your project finder search, whatever you want. Once you're on the project page here, if you want, you can hit the heart button if you want to save it to your liked projects. And that means it'll show up on your dashboard if you want to save it for later. And now we're going to get started and hit visit, which will join the project and take us to the CBARC website. So since this particular project is at a different website than SciStarter, you'll get this pop-up window that just is like, are you sure you want to leave SciStarter? So you say yes. And CBARC homepage looks like this. So we are going to sign up today. You'll be prompted to create an account. This happens with a lot of citizen science projects that SciStarter will link you up to. They will have sort of a separate account that you'll make. That's no problem. So I did that. Once your CBARC account is created, then you're just ready to go. So I'm going to add my first dog and add Sammy Boy, who is elsewhere in the house, not hanging out with us, only a little offended. So Samson does not have a referral. He's just my pet, and I'd like to learn about his behavior. This first question is important because, like James said, there are researchers studying not just pet behaviors, but all sorts of other things. So you might have a service dog or some other type of working dog. So it's really important to make sure your dog results get filed under the right category. So let's keep filling this out for Samson. So I won't read every single answer that I have for Samson, but I am going to use the excuse to talk about my dog. So first, the survey asks you a bunch of basic info, age, breed, gender, and so on. So I got Samson from a rescue. He's a big boy, 95 pounds now, not in this picture. This is his puppy picture, of course. No major questions there. Now I have another poll for you. I would love to know where you guys got your dogs. So Emma, if you could give people another question for me.
Absolutely. Again, it'll be like a worksheet. So it's several of the questions. So you can just keep rolling and I'll hit the launch so they can start answering, but there will be multiple. You'll see.
Okay, so all the questions are okay. Well, then I won't share the results, but I'll talk about them. I'll give you all a second to answer the poll. Can you all see the poll questions on your screen? It popped up for me, but I'm seeing zero answers. Where did you guys get your dog? If you don't see the poll, tell us in the chat. Okay, we'll wait about 30 more seconds for some replies.
We've got 8 of you. Oh, so
we got a few now. There was just 0 for a minute longer than I expected.
a little concerning always.
It's all good. It's all good. Thanks everyone for answering the poll. Okay, so it's looking like we are neck and neck, breeders and shelters. A couple people got them from a neighbor, friend, or relative. A couple got them from a stray. Oh, shelters pulling in the lead. That's awesome. So you all can keep answering this as we go, since you can see all the questions. We will keep going a bit. All right, so that's all the basic info. So Samson has been successfully added to the database. So now we can just dive right into the survey. So it's just a questionnaire asking about your dog, and you rank for this section, the training and obedience section, you'll rank your answers. Does your dog do these certain behaviors? Never, seldom, sometimes, usually, or always. And I found it was pretty easy to like categorize my memories into those bins. So let's see, does Samson return immediately when called off the leash? I said sometimes. He's definitely a good boy when he wants to be. He knows the commands, but if he's busy, maybe he doesn't really come. He's really good at sit though, and he's even better at stay, not counting when he's awkwardly sitting in a chair on a Zoom call. That he wasn't really into that. But I thought he's very attentive, but he's a little aloof. He's not like the sharpest dog. So I said he was sometimes slow to learn new tricks, sometimes easily distracted, sometimes will fetch. Yeah. So I didn't think that was so bad. All right. I want to see your answers to our next poll question about your dog. Does your dog show an obsessive interest in chasing or fetching thrown objects, balls, toys, etc.? So I'm going to say Samson is seldom obsessive. Sometimes if you can get his attention and he'll chase after a toy, but not always. So, oh my gosh, we have 100% have answered this question, number 2. We've got 40% have said seldom. We've got 20% said never. Dog is never interested. That's interesting. Another 20% sometimes, 13% usually, and one dog is always obsessively interested in chasing or fetching. So James, I want to turn to you for a minute. Are these typical results? And what does this question tell you about your dog?
Yeah, they are fairly typical. What's interesting there, those dogs that score a usually and always for this question are the kinds of dogs, for example, that are selected for scent detection work. So that might be search and rescue or bomb detection or drug detection. They're always looking for these dogs that have this kind of obsessive play interest, because the primary method they use for training these dogs is with a toy, by hiding toys and finding dogs that are absolutely obsessive about finding that toy and bringing it back. And so this kind of confirms the fact that, not all dogs are cut out for that sort of high energy work and very obsessive kind of work that we look for in these special kinds of dogs, which is all the more reason to, I guess, be kind of proud of your dog if he or she does show this kind of behavior, even though sometimes it can be a nuisance. I've known dogs that will just never stop. They'll bring you anything to try and initiate a play session. And if you throw that thing once, even if it's a paperclip, they'll go on bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back until you're like, wait, let's take a break from this. And the dog doesn't want to take a break. The dog's got, is so obsessively keen on this activity that they don't want to give up. And so it can be a bit wearing if you're the owner of one of these dogs, but maybe you should consider channeling this amazing behavior into, something really useful, like helping find endangered species, or, helping to rescue people from buildings that have collapsed, that kind of thing.
That's awesome. So a lot of dogs I've known have been good chasers, but not good fetchers. What does that mean if you throw something for a dog and they go get it, but then they stay with it and don't bring it back to you?
Yeah. I think the key thing is if they want the play to continue, they have to bring the toy back and ultimately give it to you. They may kind of have a little fight with you over possession of the toy, but eventually they'll give it up, and then they want you to throw it again or hide it again so that they can go and find it again. So they find the act of looking for the toy or chasing the toy enormously rewarding. But most of these dogs will quickly learn that the toy won't do it on its own. It needs you to send the toy off or hide the toy or toss it into the long grass or whatever. And so they learn to collaborate in that way with you. Chasing dogs, dogs that chase squirrels will spontaneously do that without any prompting. And they can also, as we know, become very obsessed with that type of activity. If you live in an area with squirrels or with bunny rabbits or things that run away fast, you'll soon find out if your dog is one of those dogs, because he or she will tell you in no uncertain terms by kind of vanishing off in the direction of the squirrel, or barking at the base of the tree where the squirrel's just gone. And it's interesting that these dogs don't necessarily ever have to catch a squirrel to find the chasing part of the thing very rewarding. And they'll go on and on doing it. I had a dog until recently who would chase every squirrel. He never caught a squirrel in his life. He was much too slow. The squirrels always beat him to it, but he never gave up. He always had this. I often wonder what would happen if he actually did catch a squirrel. I don't think he'd know what to do with it. It was the chase. It was the.
Would he bring it to you? Do you think?
No, I don't think
he would bring it to you.
Who knows? Because he never got close. He just loved the chase.
Yeah, that's great. We'll see if Samson ever catches his squirrel. He tries, but he's also quite slow. All right. Let's keep going to the next section. So section 2 in the Seabark survey is on aggression. So you'll see some of Samson's answers here are pretty low. He's a big softy. You can take his food away and stick your hand in his mouth, and he won't nip at you at all. A few questions that stood out to me for my dog were when toys, bones, or other objects are taken away by a household member. I've seen like a little bit of feistiness there. And the biggest one was when mailmen or other delivery workers approach the home. If somebody comes up to the door, Samson is definitely going to bark.
And that's probably the most common form of aggression we see in dogs.
Yeah.
After all, we bred dogs for thousands of years to guard our property and guard their territory, if you like. And so it's not surprising that quite a lot of them show this type of behavior. And interestingly, the mailman always reinforces the behavior by running away after he's delivered the mail. He doesn't stick around. So the dog, that's very rewarding for the dog, because the dog barks at the front door and the mailman goes away. So the dog says, I was successful in driving away this intruder. And so the dog feels fulfilled, as it were. And that then encourages him or her to do the same thing the next time somebody comes to the door.
Well, that's great. Well, now I know not to feel bad for the dog, at least.
You feel bad for the mailman.
Just feel bad for the mailman. Oh. All right, I've got another audience poll. Does your dog show hostility toward other dogs when they're walked on a leash? Never, seldom, sometimes, usually, always. Let's see if we've got some answers to this one. We've got a pretty even spread for never, seldom, sometimes, usually. Got 3 or 4 votes for each of those. And one dog is always hostile towards other dogs on leash.
Yeah, so this is quite a common problem. So even dogs that get on fine with other dogs when they're off leash become very, very aggressive when they're on leash. And we don't fully understand why this is. There's all kinds of theories that the dog is maybe feeling protective of the owner, doesn't want an unfamiliar dog coming towards that close to their owner. Or it may be that being on the leash makes the dog feel more vulnerable in some way and therefore more defensive. But it's quite a common problem. And, you know, I often hear it from dog owners that, well, my dog's fine with other dogs as long as he or she's off the leash and able to run around and play. But as soon as he's on the leash, then it becomes a problem.
That's so interesting. Well, I would say Samson, again, he's a big softie. So I'd put him in the never camp, but we've definitely met a lot of feisty dogs. All right. I'll probably skim past this. It's just the rest of the aggression section. The only other point Samson got here was squirrels, cats, squirrels, or other animals entering the yard. And we have deer in our area. And I swear if Samson smells a deer 2 blocks away in the middle of the night, he will be barking his head off in a way that we never even hear him bark. We're just like, what? The world is ending suddenly. Like, this is not his mailman bark. This is something more serious. And we think it's deer in the night.
It could be. Maybe he has some hunting dog genetics in his background. Could be.
He does. He's got some blue tick coonhound.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. All right. We sort of mentioned this one earlier, but now I want to hear your answers. This is pretty common in my experience, but I'll let James tell us if that's actually true. Does your dog guard or protect, meaning growling or snapping, their food or bones or favorite toys?
Yeah. So this is the most common form of aggression directed towards, you know, familiar people in the dog's household. It's commonly known as resource guarding. In other words, the dog has taken possession of something that it values very highly, and it doesn't want anybody taking it away from him or her. And it's not common, I have to say. It's a kind of it's a relatively uncommon behavior, but it does occur. And obviously, if it's, you know, if a dog shows this in an extreme form, then it's much more concerning, because the dog may actually bite or snap. Particularly dangerous in the context of small children, you know, who may just inadvertently wander too close to the dog when the dog's in possession of something it really likes, and then you get the child gets snapped at or bitten, often on the face, unfortunately, because children's faces are about the same level as many dogs, and that inevitably results in a sort of a relatively serious injury, and can cause no end of grief, not only for the victim of the bite, but also for the owners of the dog, and so forth and so on. And it's a common cause of people rehoming their dogs or getting rid of their dogs or relinquishing their dogs to shelters, is because the dog has started to show, you know, this relatively aggressive form of resource guarding.
Yeah, makes sense. Our results were about half said never. 2 or 3 said seldom, sometimes, and only 1 each said usually or always.
Yeah, and I think more than just the frequency here, you're interested in the severity of the behavior. So in the CBARC itself, we actually ask about the severity, because, you know, even if the dog growls every time someone approaches his food, as long as it's just a growl and nothing else, that's okay. I mean, we can live with that. But if it's the more extreme kind of behavior, like lunging or snapping or biting, then that's much more concerning.
Yeah. All right, we've got 2 more poll questions I want to hit. So the next section and
also, Anna, there's some Q&As. There's some good questions in the Q&A to address too. And if there's any way to show, can you show the poll results on screen while James talks about them? If not to put you on the spot
I
here.
can now that everybody has answered.
Even if you wanted to cut it early, I think there's a way to just say like, okay, I'm going to end.
I think we're showing that we're showing the poll results now. Can you see?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the next section on the CBARC is on fear and anxiety. Samson's pretty fearless when it comes to being approached by children and things like that. So he got all no's. But I want to hear from you guys. This one did not show up on that last one. This was definitely not a no for Samson. Does your dog bark furiously whenever somebody comes to the front door or rings the doorbell? So you all should be able to see these results with me now. This is question 5. So we've got 2 nevers, 2 seldoms, 4 sometimes, 4 usually, and 3 always. So a pretty even spread. 2 to 4 people answered for each level.
Yeah, and I'd say that was fairly typical of the dog population in general. So it sort of leans towards being a common behavior.
What kind of dog never barks at somebody coming to the door? I feel like that's just dog behavior.
There are some breeds that just don't do that. One of them being, well, one that a lot of people talk about is the Siberian Husky. Also, greyhounds very rarely bark. So and show very little of this territorial behavior. So with a greyhound, that's kind of what I'd expect. It's not what it's bred for. It wasn't bred to show guarding behavior. It was bred to, you know, chase rabbits and hares. But and you know, certainly if a rabbit runs away in front of your greyhound, you'll see it in action. In other words, it will just chase it immediately as fast as it can. And won't stop until the squirrel, it's either caught the squirrel or the squirrel's gone up a tree. But a lot of dogs have guarding type behavior sort of really in their genes, I think, and they will show this type of behavior very commonly. There also seems to be a kind of a developmental trigger. So if they're exposed to something that they felt was threatening near their house, when they're around 6 to 8 months old, there seems to be a kind of what you might call a critical period or a sensitive period in development for the development of this behavior. And dogs that don't develop it by that age may never develop it. And dogs that do develop it at that age never lose it. They keep it.
Interesting. All right. We'll keep going to the next poll question. I'm excited to hear your answers on this one. Does your dog display intense fear or anxiety during thunderstorms or fireworks? We had a good spread on this one too. We also had more nevers and more always than previous questions. So this one was more polarizing. Does that sound right to you, James?
In a way, yes, because this type of extreme phobia, really, so sometimes called a noise phobia or thunderstorm phobia, is a very extreme response in some dogs. So interestingly, you get a sort of a lot of dogs in the never category and a lot of dogs in the always category, and sort of rather fewer in between, which is kind of what I'd expect. It's a big problem for some dogs, really serious problem. These dogs that are thunderstorm phobic become intensely anxious and frightened during thunderstorms, as I'm sure that group of owners will testify. And it's a hard problem to deal with, because even just a trace of a thunderstorm, just a sort of whisper of a thunderstorm in the distance, once these animals have developed this fear, is enough to trigger the same behavior. And of course, fear is a very unpleasant sensation. And so it reinforces the fear, as it were. More fear they're exposed to, the more fearful they get. And so it's a very intractable problem, and very, very bad for the dog's welfare as well.
Interesting. All right, our last question. This one was surprising to me. I have never heard of this, I don't think. But we had quite a few respondents saying sometimes, usually, always their dog has trouble on certain types of floors. So what's the story with this one, James?
Again, I sort of put this question in because it's very relevant to working dogs. So rather like the other question that I asked about with, obsessive interest in toys, dogs that develop this type of problem, that don't want to walk across grates in the sidewalk, or kind of can't deal with slippery floors, or going up and down stairs, usually stairs with what they call open risers, so they can see through the staircase to the floor below, are impossible for working dog organizations. They just can't use them because, for example, you can imagine a guide dog that cannot walk across a grate in the sidewalk is going to be a real problem for guiding a blind person. Or a dog that won't go up and down stairs. How are they going to guide the blind handler in that situation? And it's the same actually for these search and rescue dogs. Those dogs need to be able to move about on all sorts of surfaces and deal with it without any difficulty. And so dogs that have this type of problem generally get disqualified very early on. But it's a difficult problem to eradicate, again, because it's associated with fear. And once that sort of fearful response, that emotional response of fear, becomes associated with slippery floors or open staircases or grates on the sidewalk, then it's really hard to get rid of.
Interesting. I didn't know about that. All right, we are a little low on time, so I'm going to skip through to the end. I know you wanted to hear every detail of Samson's life, but you'll have to ask me later. All right, and then once you've completed your CBARC survey, you hit complete. You cannot go back once you hit complete, so commit to your answers. Then you'll get notice that you've been filed, and you can view your scores. It shows you how your dog ranked and how it stacks up to the averages. Really quick before we sign off on the video portion of today, I just wanted to touch on a couple resources, places that you can look if you ever get stuck or you need help or you want to boost for your citizen science. So one thing you can do if you ever get stuck on a project is to ask the SciStarter community. So at the bottom of every SciStarter project page, there's like a comment box, and you can leave a review, you can ask a question, whatever you want there. You can also ask the project leaders directly. So also on every project page, there's a little button on the left-hand side that says message project. And I think that like auto sends an email to the project leaders. Sorry, James, you might get a bunch of emails now. You can also ask SciStarter directly. SciStarter exists to help you with these sorts of things. So please reach out to SciStarter at info@scistarter.org. And if you want to just sort of up your citizen science game, there are a couple of free trainings on SciStarter's website, including the Foundations of Citizen Science course. I say course, but it's like an online module. It's pretty quick, but it's a really good way to sort of jumpstart your citizen science career. I think that's all. We will share some of these links in the chat, maybe if we have them handy. But if you want more dog inspiration, our latest newsletter featured a bunch of different dog projects, including Seabark, that is posted to our blog. If you don't want to go to that link, you can just go to blog.scistarter.org and it'll probably be the first post out there. There's also a SciStarter podcast that talked about dogs this month. We're just super excited about National Dog Day. So do some more dog projects, try out Seabark, and thank you all for watching.
Actually, Anna, we have all the questions in Q&A.
Yes, we're going to stay. Everybody who's here live, please stay on the line for the Q&A.
Okay, can we stay recording for live for the Q&A? There's such good questions.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Anna.
Okay, never mind. We are staying on the line.
Okay, for the Q&A, if any of you who submitted a question wanted to say questions out loud, you're welcome to raise your hand. Or if you have an additional question that you didn't put in the Q&A, you can raise your hand and I can allow you to speak. But in the meantime, we can just run through them and I'll read them out loud for you. I'm just going to double check to make sure I didn't miss anyone raising their hand for that. Okay. Looks like we're okay. All right. Ingrid Norris, is there one particular contribution Dr. Serpil would care to share that is noteworthy due to information from this specific study?
Oh, wow. It's actually, it's hard to come up with one, but so the Seabark's now being used in about something like 130 published scientific studies. And they cover the complete gamut, really, from, you know, things that correlate with the prevalence of behavior problems to behavioral genetics to, you know, there's even one study that looked at behavior problems in dogs that were abandoned as a result of the Fukushima earthquake in Japan. So like there's a huge range of studies. Some recent ones that I think are really interesting are related to the genetics of behavior in dogs. And we have found in a couple of studies recently that that there's a very strong genetic association between behavior and genotype when you compare breeds. Now, these differences aren't huge, so they're not like massive differences, but they're very, very statistically significant. And another recent study we've been associated with has actually been able to trace dog genetic lineages by looking at their behavior. And what that means is essentially that from a very, very early stage in the history of the domestic dog, humans were selecting for these distinct aspects of behavior, presumably to help dogs perform different types of, jobs for them. We talked about, guarding, resource guarding and things like that, or territorial behavior or hunting behavior. These are all things that humans have selected for in different dog lineages. And if you look at modern dogs, you can trace the outcomes of those lineages that start way back in the early history of the dog. So that's one interesting thing. We've even found there have been some studies that have found associations between how dogs score on the Seabark and the actual anatomy of their brains, which is interesting. So there's so many studies out there. It's extraordinary how many different studies there are. When I produced this instrument, this questionnaire, I had no idea how people were going to use it in the end. And it's really actually incredibly gratifying to see how useful it's been for so many different projects.
That's excellent. And I think as a part of that question, you also answered a secondary question by that attendee. So thank you for giving us a comprehensive answer to that. We have a question that is very specific to a specific dog. So my dog is 6 and still hasn't learned that she needs to give me the toy for me to continue the fetch game. I'm not sure if it's because she likes the chase game better than the fetch game, or if she doesn't quite understand. Any tips on how I can teach her to bring back the toy? Dog tips?
That's an interesting one. I'm assuming the dog chases the toy and then attacks it at the other end, but then runs back to the owner without the toy.
That's what my dog does.
Or doesn't run back to the owner, and the
Mhm.
owner then just has to go to where the toy is. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I would start with small increments. In other words, maybe go close to the dog, but not right up to the toy, and see if you can persuade the dog to just carry the toy a short distance toward you. And if it does, then maybe reward the dog with a treat or something. And sort of gradually increase the distance. So the dog sort of gets the idea that if it picks up the toy and brings it closer to you, it will continue to get a treat. And then ultimately you can phase out the treats.
So motivated by treats. I love that. Assuming they are super motivated. Thanks, Emily, for that question. All right, we have a question from Brian. We have two 11-year-old long-haired miniature dachshunds that are brothers from the same litter. Nano is the runt of the litter and Brio is the sage of the two. I'm not sure what that means. Nano is an eternal puppy who wants to play all the time and Brio is a loner. They both do always need to be near either my wife's son or me, or they get very whiny. Each dog has a completely different personality. I'm assuming this is normal from the same litter?
Yeah, it is. And you know, some people point out that, you know, the differences between individual dogs within a breed is often greater than the difference between breeds. And that's quite true for a lot of these behaviors. The interesting part of it is that these two dogs, I assume, were brought up in the same environment. So they've been exposed to pretty much the same sorts of experiences during their early life. And despite that, they're still very different in personality. So that would be generally speaking, would be an indication that these are, you know, genetically distinct dogs, even though they're from the same litter.
That's incredibly fascinating on a personal level. My parents have two dogs from the same litter that are very different. And one has struggled with a lot of, she's the type that cannot go over the little grates in the pathway, panics about everything, does not like children. The other one's a major love bug. So it's very different.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that response. It's very wild. Okay, and then we have our last question. Is data available to browse and compare what is typical, for example, by breed or rescue dogs?
Not easily. I mean, the information is published in various scientific papers around the place, but you'd have to track them down, or you can send me an email and ask me to send you some, which I'm happy to do up to a point.
Not everyone all at once.
Yeah, the data is sort of proprietary in a sense that we don't just let everybody use it, but it's, you know, if you've got a bona fide research project and you want to do some research that requires this large data set, we're happy to provide it.
They do, when you submit your CBARC results, though, it does tell you the averages for all the dogs.
It'll show you the population average for, you know, for dogs in general for each behavior. And so you can compare your dog to the population average, as well as get a sort of color-coded kind of score that is related but different.
All right. Just as a additional to a previous question about the genetically distinct from the same litter, Brian just commented, just saying that's super interesting. Do you have anything else to comment about the genetic differences, even if it's the same litter?
No, and also it's further complicated by the fact that dogs are very sensitive animals. We know they're very sensitive animals. And something like a single frightening experience in their early life can sometimes trigger a long-term phobia or fear. We talked about thunderstorms and things like that. But years ago, we did a study of guide dog puppies and asked the puppy raisers lots of questions about whether the dogs had ever been exposed to anything frightening or been attacked by another dog or this type of thing. And surprisingly, we found quite a lot of these very, very minor, well, seemingly minor incidents of being frightened by something had long-term consequences for these guide dogs. So just being attacked once by another dog, for some of these individuals, was enough to basically ruin them permanently in terms of being guide dogs, because they became very defensive around other dogs. And in one level you can understand it, and it may not be that all individual dogs are the same. It may be that some are much more resilient, as it were, to that type of thing than others. So with some dogs, maybe they're what people in the industry call bulletproof. In other words, it doesn't matter what happens to them, they just carry on regardless, and they're very calm and unflappable. Whereas others are very sensitive, and one scary event is enough to sort of knock them off the rails.
Incredible. Oof. All right, Ryan, I hope you got plenty of insight about that. Anna.
All right, I think we are about out of time. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, James. This was awesome. I'm so glad you could join us. Emma, do you have a survey for participants?
Yes, for all of you who are still with us, when you exit the call in a moment here, you'll end up seeing a screen that'll send you to a survey. It's really, really quick. I did it as practice right before this. It takes under a minute. And it's just a little quick thing to see how we did. This is our first ever of the SciStarter Live series. So we would really appreciate your input on what to do next, what you liked, what you didn't like, etc. It'll really help us out. So thank you if you do that for us. It'll also be in our follow-up email if you miss it.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you so much. We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.